has a different connotation than it did back in the old days.
Good afternoon again, directors. Once again, it was an eventful July for CCWD's operations team. I do want to highlight, I'm waiting. I do want to highlight though, the Jenny Lind distribution crew made 51 service line repairs in the month of July and water main repairs. So that's blowing down on the main, putting full circle clamp on a leaking service line, going down to the next failure, blowing down on it, put another full circle clamp on a leaking service line, and then fixing large main breaks all at the same time. So all the while, the utility crew is methodically going down to Baldwin, replacing all of these aged service lines. So the amount of work these guys can pull off in a month is just, it's impressive. And we're starting off with the Ebbets Pass distribution crew. And what their work does is it highlights the fact that while you're also doing service lines, the guys have a whole host of other work they got to do. Oh, perfect. Okay, so here's, good old fashioned service line repair. Diving into what can often cause a leak. Tree roots, massive amounts of tree roots can restrict a pipe and pop it open. And the image on the right just illustrates when our guys can listen and identify the location of a leak, they can be really they can pretty much pinpoint where the repair is going to take place and minimize impact to the road damage. And that's what you see in the image on the right. So here's death of service line by PG&E power pole auger. I also want to highlight that there's 365 plus underground service alerts throughout the district in July. Most of those are PG&E. PG&E is just there's, I would say, anywhere between 4 and 5 projects happening at the same time related to undergrounding or system hardening for PG&E. Many of those are happening on the Ebbets Pass, and they can wreak havoc for our crews because there's obviously impacts to different utility infrastructure when those guys get to work. And so oftentimes we have to stop whatever it is we're doing, jump and go make the repair. A lot of the times PG&E is at fault because the utility was accurately located. Sometimes our marks are off because the service line, rather than going straight, did one of these. So it's kind of a constant back and forth with PG&E. Here's an interesting one, galvanized repair. So this is associated with the assessment of the presence of lead in a water system. So galvanized to galvanized connections historically raise a concern because at some point in time, lead solder may have been used in the plumbing of that service line. We completed that assessment associated with lead last year, and we found minimal to no impact related to lead service lines for our distribution systems. And so when we encounter one of these, we replace it with polypropylene. Here you go. This is the kind of the continuation of that galvanized service line. This highlights, work happens at all manner of the day and night. We have crews, somebody's on call 24/7, 365. And if the work requires it, we will go out at all hours of the day and make it happen. So you can see putting the curb stop on the water meter. You can see the crimper below the curb stop in the image on the right, below the pipe wrench. Here you go with fire hydrant rebuild on the pass. Something that we talked about at the engineering committee a couple months ago is fire hydrant maintenance. Happens in all distribution systems. So you can see that this is the breakaway coupling on the fire hydrant was broken. Image on the left, you're going to cover that opening with some plastic, and then you're going to order repair parts or go back to the shop and get those parts and then put the new repair coupling on, put the fire hydrant back. Hats off to the guys, and then you're going to go flush the system. Here you go. Paving over valves is a constant battle for us. A lot of the conversation we have tying in with Kevin's team in the engineering department for the Jenny Lind A to B project is when we go to replace service lines. What are those shutdowns going to look like? Are there any valves that could have been buried that we're going to need to go find because they bury them? And so if we don't have the resources to go out and monitor every repave or micro servicing effort, invariably somebody's going to just pave right over something. And so when the guys have a free moment, they go out and they're like, I know there's a valve over here. Let me get my metal detector. Let me get my ground penetrating radar equipment and find it. Here's some other work, pressure reducing valves. We have hundreds of pressure reducing valves up on the Ebbets Pass. They require maintenance. They need to be dewatered, and the pilot controls always need to be rebuilt. And so here's an image of dewatering one of those PRV vaults and then rebuilding the control, the CRD in this case. So a reducing control, pilot control valve, which allows that big valve to operate effectively. You see the spring and the washer in Bill's hand in the image on the right. And then the new spring in the image on the right there. And then the top of the bonnet for the small pilot control in the image on the left. Spot flushing, as we all talk about, there's this whole, I think some have coined it the regulatory circular wheel, fire protection, battling water quality. So oftentimes we're compelled to flush to ensure that water is of optimal quality. So the image on the right shows you an automatic flusher. So it's connected to a hydrant, it's on a timer, and it'll just dump water. So our guys have those placed in areas where it's not going to negatively impact the public, and they'll move those around periodically throughout the year so we don't wear out our welcome. So this is an interesting one. 2 repairs, I think at least 2 repairs during July on Dunn Road. This is the 2-inch repair. So you can see that sometimes our folks will go through and take an expansion coupling in the image on the right and make the repair with that. And I want to highlight the image on the left. They're potholing to find out where it is they're going to need to make the work happen. And then here we go on the image on the right. Sometimes you'll Romac or couple a section of pipe in, it all depends on the amount of deflection and the nature of the failure, the amount of work that the guys are going to do. So the image on the right is one fashion, and this image is another fashion. You can see that white section of pipe is soaking up a fair amount of deflection there on the pipe. And then the image on the left is another one of those Romac to Romac repairs. And then the backfill, temporary asphalt in the image on the right. And at some point in time, we'll coordinate with the county, get in there and repave all of that. I want to highlight this Milton Road service because this is something that we talk about throughout Calaveras County. This is the nature of the backfill material on all of our service line connections. This one is really interesting because that is just a pile of rocks. And so over time, those pile of rocks are going to wear a hole in that service line. And then when our guys make the repair, they're going to backfill that with AB, class 2 AB. And those are the rocks they pulled out of that one. Wow. So it's just, there's like a river bottom on the bottom under there living on top of a service line. Super popular. These kind of repairs are the kind that our guys really like to involve themselves in. You can see that giant rock in the image on the left. We usually find the smallest guy and ask him to pick that thing up and get it out of the way. But yeah, there's a lot that's associated with these repairs. Another 2-inch repair on Jenny Lynn. Incidentally, the board approved budgetary item to provide money to replace. There's about 24 2-inch cul-de-sacs in the Rancho Calaveras area. I think we replaced 4 of them last year. So we'll continue with that effort with the construction crew because they are a large source of issues for the Jenny Lynn system. Here's one right here, 2-inch repair. You can see the backfill material in the image on the left, the pickup tube for the vacuum truck, the air compressor, and then the amount of deflection in the image on the right where they're going to connect to the existing piping. Here's a service line repair in West Point, and this highlights that in West Point, we don't have a vacuum truck, we have a vacuum trailer. So this allows our crews to be a little bit more nimble and get into some smaller spaces with that trailer. In the image on the left, incidentally, that trailer was on the cover of the Aqua news magazine last month. So it's that trailer's seen a lot of airtime in recent months. You can see the service on the left blowing water right at the connection to the water main being kind of covered by a shovel. And this is a lot of the work that our construction crew did up in West Point during this month is replace old sample stations with new sample stations. And you can imagine if you have a bad sample, what the possible impact could be for the whole distribution system. So it's really important that the plumbing and the piping is sanitary and clean, and sample stations are the best way to go for that. So they have little doors and they'll have like a 1/4-inch port piece of brass or copper tubing. And then the guys can disinfect that and it's away from the dirt. It's not, a hose bib this far off the ground where somebody has to get a BACT sample and try not to get any dirt in there because dirt will cause a false positive. And so I want to say they replaced about 5 of these sample stations in that month. So hats off to the guys. This is an illustration of the work that our construction crew can do. So this is a lower access road to the Hunter's Water Treatment Plant. Super talented crew that not only do they install the road, but they install drainage, culvert piping. They do fabulous work. All manner of work that Director Thomas talked about. Work associated with the old water treatment plant and raw water conveyance pump station in Copper on the Kiva. A lot of that work will happen with this crew. They are always up to something. So this is site cleanup up at the Vallecito yard. This is our electrical crew, super talented crew. There's one thing that I've highlighted with PG&E in the recent weeks is the fact that the Copper Cove electricity is just simply unreliable. And PG&E really needs to initiate projects that provide more reliable power for that community. Because when it's 105 degrees outside, it's just really unfortunate that everybody anticipates that sooner or later sometime today, the power is going to go out, and CCWD is no stranger to that either. And so a lot of the work that's highlighted here with the electrical crew happened in Copper. So this is associated with lift station pumps. So there's overload relays on those pumps and they will trip and they'll get old over time. And they won't necessarily latch in strong enough and allow that pump, especially when it's trying to push a bunch of grease and there's some debris in the sewage, it'll trip those overloads. And so our guys found at this time that originally the overloads that were installed were the wrong size. So they replaced the overloads with the accurate size and back in business. This is at our B tank site. So this is an active construction site, but one that also experiences power fails on Moss and Copperopolis. And there's always this debate between CCWD and PG&E relative to the infrastructure of whose issue it was. And so our electricians and PG&E, I must highlight, work really well together in Copper. And so this was a case of we both had an issue. Our automatic transfer switch had failed and PG&E had an issue up on the pole. So while PG&E is in the bucket truck looking at their issue on the pole, our electricians are putting on their arc flash suit and assessing what's going on at the bus bar inside of the pump station. So super fashionable picture of our electrician, Tony Brolio, who does fabulous work. Hats off to Tony. Here's some more of that work. So another part of the crew is troubleshooting what's going on the leads. And then the HMI, sometimes you might see in the claim summary purchases of HMIs. These HMIs get blasted by the sun and they periodically fail. And a lot of the time, HMIs are our only way to interface with a pump station recipe. So what time does the pump kick on? At what level does it kick off? When does the secondary pump kick on? So there's a whole host of things that go into that. More work associated with that B tank electrical work. And then finally, this is often what a person sees first thing in the morning when they come into work and they're on call and they get that call for a service line leak on so-and-so street. They drive up to that.
That was in Yellowstone.
It could be. Yeah, it could be Yellowstone. But I would venture a guess that that's Rancho Calaveras.
So all the lines we saw, they weren't originally bedded with sand or anything that.
That's correct.
And you're doing that now or what?
That's right. Yes. So when we replace or repair, we put in class 2AB as our engineering specification. And that's what we use. Yep, exactly right.
And then for the issue of roots and the HDPE pipe, how do we stop that from happening again in the future?
So generally, root intrusion can be difficult. It's usually finding water somehow. So if we replace the section of line with HDPE or some sort of polypropylene or whatever we use, if it's watertight, and we cut those roots back, generally they're not going to restrict or constrict the pipe anymore because they're not finding any water. Usually what happens is there's a coupling, there's a tap or a service, there's something there that's just dripping a little bit of water and it's going to find it. And then it's going to just, it's calling all of its friends. Hey, all you roots, come over here. We're going to wrap ourselves around this. However, though, we do encounter situations where there's just naturally occurring groundwater or there's water flowing through that area. And then that's a problem. And what we usually do is if you cut those roots back far enough, we might pull a tree out. We do something to give us years, to buy us years. Yeah. That often involves, working with the property owner. It's not uncommon for us to knock on somebody's door and write them a letter and ask them, hey, are you okay? There's this 15-foot, small bull pine tree out here by your water meter. Are you okay with us if we just cut it down? And that way it'll protect both our system and yours. And usually folks are pretty okay with that.
I've heard of those arc suits before, but they look like they could save a life or two.
Absolutely. Right. Yep. Double gloves, leather gloves, rubber gloves, suit, the helmet, the whole bit. Yeah. It's great.
Kind of water pressure would cause a geyser like that. That's
110, 120. Yeah. Right. Yeah.
Should have seen the blowout on Highway 4.
Oh yeah. That was a
good one there.
that was a good one. That was a good one.
That was our water.
Yeah, there's boulders like that out in the middle of the street when it blew.
Yeah, that was a PG&E CCWD water main versus PG&E auger.
I
And
hit the main.
under pressure,
It hit the main.
hit the main.
Yeah, that was a big deal.
Yeah,
Traffic stop.
move some boulders. Yeah.
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 That's the thing, when you see some of the backfill that they did, they built the Rancho, Boise Cascade built it in the 60s and 70s, but they weren't hauling any gravel anywhere. They were just backfilling, and so many times you'll see big boulders. Even there was a repair there by the A tank when they started doing that. I looked in the stuff they're taking out are just huge boulders that they had, broken up and just put it right back on top of the pipe.
That's crazy.
Well, there was their own development, there was nobody to inspect it.
Wild West.
Does PG&E compensate us if they've
Yeah. Yep. Absolutely.
So they said, we send them a bill for our hours, actual hours served. and they pay us.
Yes. Yeah.
All right, any other questions?
Thank you.